interesting conversation. Millions of people watched it. It was great. We talked about aliens. We talked about your encounters with aliens, experiences, what you've done. Obviously a doctor, scientist, the things you've worked on. I even think your dad, was he working on the certain responsibilities with the atomic for the government? What was your dad's?
No, it was my uncle helped design the lunar module.
The lunar, that's right, your uncle.
On the moon the first time with Neil Armstrong.
So this is in your genes. You've been interested in this for a while. And then recently, I was late to this. 2 months ago, I watched The Lost Century, right, and How to Reclaim It. A documentary they did that I think came out in 2023, if I'm not mistaken. Right, it came out last year. I watched it, and then I was blown away by the Invention Secrecy Act, and I went down a rabbit hole, and I wanted to find out who wrote this bill, and what happened to the guy that wrote the bill. The guy that wrote the bill, you know who he is, the John Sparksman, I think his name is, or something like that. You know, he ends up becoming the nominee for the Democratic vice presidential candidate of 1952, exactly the year they wrote the bill, and they're holding on to 6,000 patents. And then I had my wife watch it. Then I had my son watch it. He's here right now. He just met you a few minutes ago. And I think the world needs to know about this. Right. And that's when I said, I think we need to do part 2. And I'm glad you said yes.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. So
you do a great show.
So let's start off with that. I mean, I got a lot of things I want to go through with you, but I want to start off with that. To the average person, when I ask them, have you heard of the Invention Secrecy Act? When I tell you 99% say I've never heard of it, I'm being friendly. Right. Because 100% people are like, what is the Invention Secrecy Act of 1951? Can you tell the audience what is the Invention Secrecy Act of 1951, who was behind it, and why?
Well, it actually became an offshoot of the projects from the 40s dealing with energy and technology and propulsion systems that, if they were disclosed, would be the immediate replacement of oil, gas, coal, surface transportation, public utilities. Well, in today's dollars, you're talking probably over $1,000 trillion. So what most people don't realize is that around between 1945 and 1954 was the heyday of electromagnetic engineering dealing with energy and propulsion. And it was from 2 sources. Research that had been done in the late 1800s and early 20th century, and even things that people call anti-gravity, not the correct scientific term, but let's just go with that. It's really gravity control. Those experiments started in the late 20s with T. Townsend Brown and the Kolosky-Frost experiment in Germany, and where very high voltage systems would cause objects to lift and basically have mass cancellation and look like they're defying gravity and levitate.
This is the G engines you're talking about.
Yep. And but that was earlier. I mean, that was later. This was 20s. But those began to be more and more classified. So T. Townsend Brown's work became some of the core founding for what's called the RAND Corporation in Ventura, California. But those got populated with the research from retrieving extraterrestrial vehicles in the mid-40s and 50s, where they began to study them under a very highly classified project. I have the documents. We've just released all of them to the public last month in our Disclosure Project Intelligence Archive. But it describes, in one of the Canadian top-secret documents, that a top-secret team was working on this in 1950, and the work they were doing surpassed the secrecy of the development of the hydrogen bomb, the ultimate doomsday weapon, you can imagine. Now, this is an authenticated, top-secret document. So the punchline of that is there was this technological breakthroughs, both human and in studying objects from outer space, let's say, that came together, the 2 mighty rivers that became this torrent, but very classified. So they realized that there were too many people stumbling across this, and they created this act to give the government the power that even if you don't apply for a patent, if they learn you have something that they want to seize, all they have to do is issue a national security order on it, and they take it. And this is not a conspiracy theory and all that. It's just a fact. You can look up people can look this up. And I've worked over the years with many, many people who've had that happen to them, geniuses that have had their work confiscated. And it would be an enormous benefit to humanity. But The super elite, global elite, don't want that out. They didn't want it out in the 50s, and they don't want it out now. So that is the core of the secrecy behind what people call UFOs or UAPs. That's really the heart of it. The other thing is that when I go into a SCIF, a secure compartment information facility where top secret information is exchanged, one of the first things I do, whether it's with the members of Congress or some military people, is to tell them, see this video that the Pentagon has confirmed is real of this UFO flying off the coast of California, and they got released a few years ago. And I said, just look at that. Forget all the esoteric and alien cachet and baggage. That is an alternative energy and propulsion device, period. And I said, if you look at how it's moving and the sensors that they put on that thing, both from space and the ship, the big battleship out there, and the jet pilots flying those F-18s, they had no heat signature. And Pat, here's the thing. There's no jets, there's no rockets, and if it was a nuclear power plant, it would be very hot because fission is extremely hot. So how is it doing? How is it moving like that? Well, it's using this whole new physics. And this is why most of our Air Force and other pilots, when they encounter these, they immediately assume all of them are alien or extraterrestrial, when in reality, I'd say 70, 80% of them are ours. Highly classified, illegally run covert programs without the oversight of the Congress and the president. So that secrecy has become so embedded. Eisenhower had a pretty good clue about it when he left office, and he said, beware the military-industrial complex. And I remind people he's a 5-star general, right, and a conservative Republican, moderate Republican back then. But he was no enemy of the military. But he warned the dangers to democracy and secrecy because of this. Now, he didn't mention the UFO issue, but he was very much read in, and I can prove that. Our archive goes through that. And he then, by 1957 to 8, was being pushed aside out of those programs. And we actually have an attorney who at the time was a young man in the Army. His testimony we released in this archive, where he says he was at the White House Signal Corps in 1959, 60, before Eisenhower left. And Eisenhower told him that he was being blocked control over these projects. So these covert programs have been, let's just say, off the leash for most of, the last 60 years.
So I want to ask you this. So I'm going through timeline while you're talking, and I'm taking notes here,
Sure.
So Hiroshima happened August 6, 1945.
Right.
Okay. Nagasaki happened August 9th, 1945. Okay. Invention Secrecy Act happened in 1951, which ended up being a law 1952, led by Senator John Sparksman. Great. And that year, he ends up being nominated as the vice president for the Democratic, nominee. Okay. Then the election that year, that the day we voted on Tuesday, was November 4th of 1952. 3 days prior to that, on November 1st of 1952, is the big explosion that we had, the thermonuclear explosion that took place. Rob, if you can pull this up, type in hydrogen bomb year. Just type in hydrogen bomb year. Okay. So if you type in hydrogen, can you zoom in that? I just want to read that right there. The U.S. tested the first full-scale thermonuclear device on November 1st of 1952. The result was an explosion that was equivalent to one produced by more than 10 million tons of TNT. This was approximately 700 times the power of the uranium bomb dropped in Hiroshima. Stephen, 700. So here's what I'm trying to find out. The time span from August 6th, Hiroshima, August 9th, Nagasaki, Invention Secrecy Act of 1951, 52 becomes in, then November 1st, we have the hydrogen bomb, November 4th is the election. Is the reason why they put the Invention Secrecy Act a noble cause, or was it the fact that people of big industries were afraid that maybe they're about to lose some of their control and business that they have? Because there's a part of it that could be like, no, it was noble. We were worried. We wanted to make sure that certain things wouldn't be available to other people, because if they did, what if out there in the free marketplace somebody explodes and messes with this uranium, and then all of a sudden we lose our country, we lose all this stuff. How much do you think was noble? How much of you think it was, hey, you passed this bill, we'll make you the vice president, we can do this? What do you think happened there?
I think it's both. I think for certain there are certain valid national security secrets that are technological that should be kept that way, and I don't have a grievance with that. What's terrible is when there are corrupting influences from financial and corporate sectors that then it's the tail wagging the dog of the government of we the people. Right? And, so my great whatever grandfather was the first prisoner of war in the American Revolution. And, my family, my dad was hand-to-hand combat in World War II in the Pacific. We look at this. I mean, the people I work with who are special forces and military, and they look at this and they go, well, if you have a corrupting influence and you have that kind of state power, then you can get into trouble if there isn't proper oversight. And there hasn't been. What I'm trying to say is that between the 50s and now, after Eisenhower got shoved aside, the folks who have been working and keeping these secrets are not necessarily doing it on behalf of the U.S. government or the American people or the world. They're doing it on behalf of their own interests, which are usually financial and global power related. And that is the problem. It's a big problem when no one's minding the store. This is why I've been trying to get Congress to have subpoena power through the House Oversight Committee and the members of Congress I've been meeting with, which we'll get into that. That's just been blocked, by the way. Because without that, you really have a Frankenstein we created in secrecy that Eisenhower warned us about that's really gone crazy. So yes, there are some valid national security secrets that would be covered by that. But on the other hand, it's like your grandmother's skirt. It hides everything, right? And they can hoover up totally legitimate technologies that, for example, you could have an electric car but not have 900 pounds of lithium-ion batteries. You'd have a battery about this big, and it would start up a electromagnetic generator pulling energy out of, we can talk about this, what's called the quantum vacuum or zero-point energy field, and you'd never have to plug the thing in, right? So that
was in there at that time?
That existed in 1920s. Nikola Tesla had one, and we've documented this. Now remember, when Nikola Tesla died in 1943, the FBI went in and seized, I think it was 40-some trunks, or no, it was 20-some trunks of secret papers. And I have a group that's thinking of suing for those. But those—
Who still has that? The U.S. government has that, or the military-industrial complex has that?
This is a good question. Because where does this stuff go once it gets hoovered up under the Secrecy Act? And this is a big problem, because you would think, let's make this real for people, right? So back going 1993 is 31 years. I was asked as a young doctor to come up and brief the director of the CIA for Bill Clinton, and R. James Woolsey. And it's because he and the president had started looking into this issue, the whole UFO issue, all of it. And they had been denied access and blocked and were being lied to.
You're in the room with both of them?
I'm in the room with the CIA director.
Okay.
And my POC, my point of contact to him, who is the head of a military think tank. So I thought, honestly, I mean, you put me under the sodium pentothal. I thought it was a ruse to pick my brain because I had these aerospace connections in my family. I had all this information, and it was just counterintelligence trying to figure out what I knew. No, it turned out the CIA director was completely blocked. The president had been blocked. And then I found out recently Clinton was threatened. And I have a document that also establishes that from someone who was with him, where he admitted that he was personally threatened if he looked into this much further. And so I think this, was my coming of age. To be honest with you, I was always interested in UFO and ET issue. I'd had sightings when I was younger. Had a family member who designed a thing that landed on the moon with Neil Armstrong. And yes, we did go. They just didn't tell us everything that happened. But the the CIA director was shaken, and he couldn't get access, even with the clearance that a director of CIA would have. So there's a parallel illegal black government system that I think is mostly corporate. So if you're asking me where the center of power on this is, you know, everyone in Congress and the National Security Council and the president wouldn't add up to anything, a hill of beans, compared to what Lockheed Skunk Works and my uncle, Northrop Grumman, he had his whole career with Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, and some of these other huge behemoths that are contractors, but who have highly compartmented operations dealing with this. Now, we actually have the information and a letter from the director, the head of the Lockheed Skunk Works, the top secret aerospace engineering. And it's in the archive. We release this now, both the letter written to him from a friend that his widow gave to us and the reply from Ben Rich. And it says point blank, his friend said, do we have these UFOs? And he says, yes, some are extraterrestrial, many are ours. And he admits they're ours, meaning human-made. So people think that technology stands still, but if you're at the threshold in the 20s, 30s, 40s, discovering this area of science, of electromagnetic physics, post-quantum sort of entanglement, we can get into this, it's sort of boring for the general public. And then, you know, you have special access projects that are top secret, but then decide it's so sensitive, we're not going to let the president control this anymore, or the Congress, except for a few devils that they put in there that do control it. So it's a complicated sort of architecture of this secrecy. You have to throw your civics, high school civics book in the trash.
So let me go back to this. Still, I'm stuck on this Invention Secrecy Act from purely a capitalistic standpoint, not even the alien side and all this other stuff that's in there, right? So let's go back to it. So enough energy to, you know, 0 point energy, which we'll get into. Okay, great. And that's Nikola Tesla and what happened to him. And they came and they took the files, God knows how many boxes, and they went to Trump's uncle, Fred Trump's brother, John. They go to him. Hey, is this anything that's a threat if it's leaked to the public? No, nothing to worry about. Great. They still end up keeping it anyways, right? But I'm trying to find out. So if you were to simplify to the audience wants to know, hey, Stephen, what are some of those 6,000 patents that we have, and what industries would they destroy, and how much would our lives improve? For example, you know, one, we have access to being able to produce cars that can run on water, and it puts out of a $5 trillion oil industry out of business overnight. Right. You know, we have the pharmaceutical side to be able to come up and solve cancer tonight, we just have, because if we do the amount of chemotherapy business is a such and such amount of billion-dollar industry, we don't want to put that out of this. We have the ability to do it. I want to know, do you know what technologies and patents are in there?
I do.
Can you share some of them with the public that, maybe would be revealing?
Well, I can do better than that. You go to our archive, and there's a whole file of, I believe, thousands of pages of those that were copied by a man I knew who's passed away named John Bedini. And there was a CIA officer who had approached me, but previously had approached him and took him, and it's called the Secretcy files, S-C-G-E-K-I, Secretcy. And he was a CIA officer who allowed Mr. Bedini to go into a...
Bedini or Benini?
Bedini, B-E-D-I-N-I.
Got it.
John Bedini, and he's passed away, but a couple years ago. But this CIA officer, Secretcy, he let him go into a facility where they had confiscated these sort of inventions over many decades. And they had the patents in file cabinets. And he told John Bedini, he said, he was trying to recruit him into the agency in a covert program dealing with technologies, because the guy was a genius with electromagnetic engineering, Bedini was. And he let him for 24 hours copy anything he wanted. And so he went in, he did. But the CIA officer, Secretcy, eventually was told, no, I'm not going to join your operation. but Bedini had kept a copy of those files, which members of my team digitized.
So the CIA officer didn't know that he took those files.
He didn't know he kept a copy. He thought he got them all back. And now we've released them. They were in an encrypted CD, I believe, and the encryption's been removed, and people can go in there. Now that was the tip of the iceberg, because I mean this was a huge facility. It's like the end of the movie where Steven Spielberg, the Raiders of the Lost Ark, when they're rolling the thing into this big warehouse top.
Where was this facility?
It was in the upper Midwest, is what I've been asked just to say, in a old schoolhouse facility that was cordoned off and looked like nothing important.
So you know where it's at, but just you're not able to say.
Yep.
Okay.
I do know where it is.
Got it. And would it be a place that the average person walks by every day and they have no clue what it is?
They'd have no idea.
And is there protection, like hardcore secret, protection around it that you can't see, or are there people outside of the building that you could tell that something's weird about this building?
There are sensors.
There are sensors. Got it.
Right.
And what are some of the things you guys found? Thousands of pages. What are some things your team and you and your team found where it's, why would they hide something like this from? Why would they keep this away from us?
Well, they had electromagnetic devices that were so-called free energy. They had technologies that would take water, as you mentioned, and do the hydrolysis past the Faraday constant, where it would be at certain voltages and frequency, you get a magnetically charged hydrogen and oxygen gas you can burn, get energy. The only pollution is water vapor. All of those sort of technologies. But then there were other things that were even stranger, where you can cause basically atomic changes in the electron shell so that you can move up and down the periodic table at certain frequencies, magnetic field frequencies, so that you could theoretically take tin and turn it into gold. Transmutation. It's like the alchemist, but it's high tech. And these are very old discoveries. And so one of the big problems is when you ask this question, why wouldn't we have it? The economic power is really about the money. It's about dollars. But when you start talking about trillions and dozens or hundreds of trillions of dollars, now you're talking about something that is an impact that's way beyond, inventing a cell phone or even the internet. This is way past that, because our entire planet is running on an antiquated grid and energy paradigm from the late 1800s. And if you take nuclear power plants, the mid-40s. And what I remind people is, do you really think fundamental energy generation and propulsion technologies haven't gone forward since 1945? This is ridiculous. But those technologies, which prompted these national security patent acts and seizure laws, both had applications. They could be sold to Congress because there were legitimate state secrets. You didn't want to just let someone leak out, your design for a nuclear warhead, for example. But on the other hand, there are things that would, technologies that would greatly benefit humanity. And let me remind people, this would literally end all pollution on Earth, but would also end poverty on the planet within about 20 years. Why? Right now, you have 3 billion people on the planet. The Economist came out with an article, I think 2 years ago, about this, that don't even have energy to cook their food. So they're like cutting down any brush in the desert and the rainforest just to be able to have some charcoal to cook food. That's 3,000 million people. This isn't sustainable. This is not a way to have a planet, right? So these technologies would change that. And many, many people in these covert programs agree this should change. But you're stepping on some very big toes. I mean, you're talking the kind of macroeconomic power globally that is way past anything that the president deals with. And that's the problem. Because on the one hand, it's some people have told me who are in this system, it's like the cure is worse than the disease. That to release this, it'd be too disruptive. I said, yes, it should have been released 100 years ago. When it would have been transition, would have been easy. But now look at the mess we're in because of this secrecy, but also the illegal application of it in the last 60 years. Now, that is what Congress right now is trying to grapple with. But it's a big mistake for the public to think because you're the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee or the co-chairman, like
you're a nobody,
like Mr. Rubio.
Yeah.
Those folks are told either nothing or some version of a lie that they want to be told. This is what happened to Mr. Trump, by the way, in his first term, and also Mr. Pence, because a friend of Mr. Pence's family works with me, and we found out what happened. But the problem with all of this is what has happened to democracy and oversight and we the people, but also. When you talk about we have a free market economy and capitalism, do we? I mean, if the most important discoveries in sciences of the last 100 years have been ruthlessly confiscated and kept secret, no, we have a faint shadow. We have a managed economy. It's not quite as managed as, say, China's or the Soviet Union's or Venezuela and controlled, but it's still controlled and managed. It's a mistake to think it's free. Free market. It isn't. The only way it could be free is that if the technologies that were not weaponized, and this is when you mentioned that, Mr. Trump's uncle said, no, these are fine. They're not going to hurt anything. Well, they wouldn't hurt. It's not like they're dangerous. It's just that it's going to hurt you if you own, a $3 trillion oil field off of Venezuela or whatever, and these big interests. So I think this is, and I'm not saying that everybody in the oil industry knows about this. They're not. They're just doing their jobs. But I'll tell you, there's a Fortune 50 companies chairperson trying to come forward. And
Fortune 50 chairperson that's trying to come forward?
Yeah, former chairman. He's getting up there. He's about 79 or 80.
He's still active? Oh, former chairman.
But he has the documents and the information. He wants to come forward with them. But when he reached out to me last year, they threatened him and his family and his grandchildren.
Is he a money guy? Is he financially free?
Oh, sure. I mean, my God.
So how do they threaten him? What do they say? How do you threaten a person like that? What are we going to do to you?
They just kill your whole family.
No, who calls a person like that?
Really spooky people. I've had them appear in my life and threaten me. I say, buzz off. But I've had 4 people on my team killed.
4 people in your team killed?
I have. And when Mr. Grush was asked about this at the House Oversight hearing last year, he said,